and yet too great wholly to know. She walked in their front towards a greater light, their leader and queen over their hearts and souls, one close to their bosoms, yet divine and far.
Good morning. We're reading in Book 4, the Book of Birth and Quest, Canto 2, The Growth of the Flame. We've come to page 364. In the last canto, we saw the birth of Savitri, coming after about 1 year when, after Aswapati had encountered the Divine Mother and she agreed to descend and take a human form on earth. So we saw her grow up. At first, very attuned around her, communing with the nature spirits. Later, developing in the context of the Vedic culture which surrounded her, taking in its arts and crafts and philosophy and spirituality. The sages who would come and speak and tell of the eternal truths. And in this canto, she's continuing to grow the Godhead within her. Her soul is pressing more towards the surface. And we're beginning to see, it continues, about her relations with those around her, that she was such a kind of bright light, such a prodigy. She expressed this inner divinity that others had difficulty approaching her, and they could not really match her in any way, and they were attracted to her by her light and her beauty and that divinity that was shining out from her. And yet it was too powerful, in a sense, for them, for many of them. And we spoke about how this part of the canto also relates to the mother in the ashram, and how the various disciples were relating to her on that physical level, because she also acted as if a mother to her children in the ashram. She was taking care of all their physical needs, looked in on them to see how they were faring, both in their material life and in their sadhana. And many were clutching at her physical presence and were becoming jealous of others who had the opportunity to meet her on a physical basis more often than they did. And even she would be giving herself very generously to them, her time, her suggestions, her help. And yet they were kind of greedy for that, and it was never enough. I mean, it wasn't all the disciples that behaved that way, but that this was a common pattern in the ashram. Sri Aurobindo writes about this somewhat in his letters on the Mother, in the volume of his complete works, The Mother and Letters on the Mother. I was going to bring a copy, but I failed to bring it along with me. But there he speaks of the need for this inner relation with the Mother, that had to take precedent, and that this physical relation with her always had to be a secondary thing, that it could only help, in a sense, if they had that inner relation. Otherwise, it could even become an interference in establishing that deeper relation with the Mother, because they kept it at this physical level. So he describes there some of the different ways in which the people were relating to her in these unfortunate ways. But it also becomes clear that the hostile forces were also interjecting themselves into that relation and playing on the weaknesses of the disciples in their relations with the Mother, just to cause problems kind of in the ashram and problems in their own sadhana. So Sri Aurobindo had to continually caution the disciples about this and explain all of these matters to them. In the part that we're reading just now, on page 364, Sri Aurobindo gives us kind of the truer relation that there should be, but it becomes intermixed with these other negative, unfortunate types of relations that interject themselves. But maybe I'll just read a little. Starting just at the bottom of page 363, the third line from the bottom. So here's the proper relation. Some felt her with their souls and thrilled with her. A greatness felt near, yet beyond mind's grasp. To see her was a summons to adore. To be near her drew a high communion's force. So men worship a God too great to know, too high, too vast to wear a limiting shape. They feel a presence and obey a might, adore a love whose rapture invades their breasts, to a divine ardor quickening the heartbeats, a law they follow, greatening heart and life. Open to the breath is a new diviner air. Open to man is a freer, happier world. He sees high steps climbing to self and light. Her divine parts, the soul's allegiance called. It saw, it felt, it knew the deity. Her will was puissant on their nature's acts. Her heart's inexhaustible sweetness lured their hearts. A being they loved whose bounds exceeded theirs. Her measure they could not reach, but bore her touch, answering with the flowers' answer to the sun. They gave themselves to her and asked no more. So we'll continue from there. And perhaps, would you like to read?
I speak not very well in English, but I can try, but I think it's no good sound because...
It's okay, you can try.
I try, okay. I continue where you finish, no?
Yes.
Okay. One greater than themselves to wide for they can. Their minds cold, not understand, nor wholly new, played to hers, moved at the words. They felt a good head and obeyed a call. Answered to her, led and did her work in the world. Their lives, their nature, moved compelled by hers, as if truth of their own larger selves put on aspect of divinity, to exalt them to a pitch beyond their hearts. They felt a larger future meet their work. She held their hands, she touched. They were moved by her towards great unknown things. Fate drew them, and the joy to feel themselves hers. They lived in her, they saw the world with her. Some turned to her against their nature's bent. divided between wonder and revolt, drawn by her charm and mastered by her will, possessed by her striving to possess.
Just
continue?
continue? Yeah, okay. A little more.
Impatient subject, their tired, longing hearts, hugging the bonds close of the which the most complained, murmured at a walk they would have wept to lose. The splendid yoke of her beauty and her love, others parched her with life's blind desires, and claiming all of her as their lonely own, hastened to engross her sweetness meant for all.
Thank you. We'll stop there.
Okay.
So in this first part, this continues of this beautiful relation that she had with many of the disciples. And I kept referring to those in the ashram, but of course there were also the disciples in Auroville too. So there are some beautiful lines. They felt the Godhead and obeyed a call, answered to her lead, and did her work in the world. Their lives, their natures, moved, compelled by hers, as if the truth of their own larger selves put on an aspect to exalt them to a pitch beyond their earth. They felt a larger future meet their walk. She held their hands. She chose for them their paths. They were moved by her towards great unknown things. Faith drew them, and the joy to feel themselves hers. They lived in her. They saw the world with her eyes. Mm-hmm. That's what she hoped for, this kind of relation, I think, in her disciples, and here in Auroville as well. It comes into the relation with some people, or at times, one side attracted, the other side pulling away. So I think that's something maybe that happens in all of us to some extent. Drawn by her charm and mastered by her will. But here, possessed by her striving to possess. Impatient subjects, their tied, longing hearts, hugging the bonds close, of which they most hold over them. They would have cried if that hold would have been released, if she would have withdrawn from them. They would have. So it's showing that division again. They complained about her hold over them, and yet they would have cried if it wasn't there. Yeah. Yeah, it's that they want to pull her down to their level. So that's kind of, and it took the form in the ashram at times that they complain that you should see me more often. Why do you see X 4 times a week and I only get to see you once? Things like that. Like, you should give your time to me just as much. So it was that sort of thing.
She was also trying to possess, last time, possessed by her.
Yeah.
She was also trying to possess.
Not that she was striving, she did possess. I mean, she had them in her, she also possessed them. No, they were striving.
Possessed by her, they were possessed by her or not?
Yeah.
Or striving to possess.
They were striving to possess her. Yeah. So let's continue, Sudanya.
As the earth claims light for its lone separate need, demanding her for their soul jealous claps, they asked from her movements bounded like their own, and to their smallness carved a like response. Or they repined that she surpassed their grip, and hoped to bind her close with lunging cords, or finding her touch desired too strong to bear. They blame her for a tyranny they loved, shrank into themselves as from too bright a sun, yet hankered for the splendor they refused. Angrily enamored of her sweet, passionate ray, the weakness of their art could hardly bear. They longed but cried out at the touch desired, inapt to meet divinity so close, intolerant of a force they could not house. Some drawn unwillingly by her divine sway, endured it like a sweet but alien spell, unable to mount to level too sublime. They yearn to draw her down to their own earth, are forced to center round her their passionate lives. They hope to bind to their hearts human needs, her glory and grace that had enslaved their souls.
Thank you. relation. As earth claims light for its lone separate need, it makes me think of the sun, which also Savitri represents in some way. The word Savitri relates to the sun, claiming for itself, for its own need, her light, demanding her for their sole jealous clasp. They asked from her movements bounded like their own, and to their smallness craved a like response. They wanted her to come down to their level so they could relate. And it makes me think, I think it's hard for us who haven't met the mother to really understand what it must have been like to be in her physical presence. I think it was quite a powerful experience for many, and that kind of intensity of divine light and force, it would be hard for many, I think, to bear, and certainly to relate to in kind of as an equal, which Savitri here is kind of looking for, to some extent, somebody that can really kind of join her and be her true companion and understand her. She's far beyond the humans around her. They shrank into themselves as from too bright a sun, yet hankered for the splendor they refused. Her sweet, passionate ray, the weakness of their earth could hardly bear. They longed, but cried out at the touch desired, inapt to meet divinity so close, intolerant of a force they could not house. So here we've seen the various people around Savitri, how they were responding to her presence. Now, at the break, we turn to Savitri and how she is relating to this situation. Yeah, in a sense we can see it as that their souls are responding. She's taken captive their souls. Souls are just want to give themselves, but that outer nature has the difficulty. So that's where that division comes. It's on one side their souls are attracted, but on the outside, in their mind, in their vital, in their physical, they can't really bear that presence. So let's continue. Next. Okay.
But mid this world, these hearts that answered her call, none could stand up her equal and her mate. In vain she stooped to equal them with her heights, too pure that air was for small souls to breathe. These comrade selves to raise to her own wide breaths, her heart desired and fill with her own power, that a diviner force might enter life, a breath of Godhead greaten human time. Although she leaned down to their littleness, covering their lives with her strong, passionate hands, and knew by sympathy their needs and wants, and divined in the shallow wave depths of their lives, and met and shared their heartbeats of grief and joy, and bent to heal their sorrow and their pride, lavishing on her lone peak, to lift to it their aspirations' cry. And though she drew their souls into her vast and surrounded with the silence of her deeps, and held as a great mother holds her own, only her earthly surface bore their charge, and mixes fire with their mortality. A greater self-lived soul, unclaimed within.
Thank you. To them to strengthen their aspiration towards the divine, and to fill with her own power, that a diviner force might enter life, a breath of Godhead great in human time. So she's trying to pour her forces into those around, and her light and her love, to help to raise them, to lift them. She dived in the shallow wave depths of their lives and their pride, lavishing the might that was hers on her lone peak, to lift to it their aspirations' cry. But though she did this, and held as the great mother holds her own, only her earthly surface bore their charge. Only the outer part of her being was approaching them, leaning towards them, reaching out to help them. Her own inner being remained alone within. Her greater self-lived soul, unclaimed within. We have a little bit of reference to the storyline of Savitri looking for a mate, but none, so we see in the beginning, none could stand up her equal and her mate. And here she remains sole, alone, unclaimed within her own being. But we still see a lot of parallels with the mother of the ashram. So we continue. Klaus.
Oftener in damp nature stir and peace, a nearness she could feel serenely won. The force in her drew earth's subhuman broods, and to her spirit's large and free delight, she joined the ardent-hued magnificent lives of animal and bird and flower and tree. They answered to her with a simple heart. In man a dim, disturbing somewhat lives. It knows but turns away from divine light, preferring the dark ignorance of the fall. Among the many who came drawn to her, nowhere she found her partner of high tasks, the comrade of her soul, her other self, who was made with her, like God and nature, one. Some near approached, were touched, caught fire, then failed. Too great was her demand, too pure her force. Thus lighting earth around her like a sun, yet in her inmost sky an orb aloof, a distance severed her from those most close. Puissant, apart her soul as for God's live.
Thank you. So we see that Savitri was close to nature around her. She felt that communion with the spirits of nature, she joined the ardent-hued, magnificent lives of animal and bird and flower and tree. They answered to her with a simple heart. And we see this also in the mother, her deep relation that she had with the flowers, also with the trees around, the animals, the birds. There's I think a passage here about this. There was a question. If the inner truth, the divine presence in the psychic, is so conscious in the child, it could no longer be said that a child is a little animal, could it? So that's the question. It says, why not? In animals, there is sometimes a very intense psychic truth. Naturally, I believe that the psychic being is a little more formed, a little more conscious in a child than in an animal. But I have experimented with animals just to know. Well, I assure you that in human beings I have rarely come across some of the virtues which I have seen in animals. Very simple, unpretentious virtues. As in cats, for example. I have studied cats a lot. If one knows them well, they are marvelous creatures. I have known mother cats which have sacrificed themselves entirely for their babies. People speak of maternal love with such admiration as though it were purely a human privilege, but I have seen this love manifested by mother cats to a degree far surpassing ordinary humanity. I have seen a mother cat which would never touch her food until her babies had taken all they needed. I have seen another cat which stayed 8 days beside her kittens without satisfying any of her needs because she was afraid to leave them alone. And a cat which repeated more than 50 times the same movement to teach her young one how to jump from a wall onto a window. And I may add, with a care and intelligence, a skill which many uneducated women do not have. And why is it thus? Since there was no mental intervention, it was altogether spontaneous instinct. But what is instinct? It is the presence of the divine in the genus of the species. And that is the psychic of animals, a collective, not an individual psychic. I have seen in animals all the reactions, emotional, affective, sentimental, all the feelings of which men are so proud. The only difference is that animals cannot speak of them and write about them, so we consider them inferior beings because they cannot flood us with books on what they have felt. She had spoken earlier about children also, that the psychic being is more prominent in the child. She says, this little true thing in the child is the divine presence in the psychic. It is also there in plants and animals. In plants it is not conscious. In animals it begins to be conscious. And in children it is very conscious. I have known children who were much more conscious of their psychic being at the age of 5 than at 14, and at 14 than at 25. And above all, from the moment they go to school, where they undergo that kind of intensive mental training, which draws their attention to the intellectual part of their being, they lose almost always and almost completely this contact with their psychic being. It's as if you were only an experienced observer, if you could tell what goes on in a person simply by looking into his eyes. It is said the eyes are the mirror of the soul. That is a popular way of speaking, but if the eyes do not express to you the psychic, it is because it is very far behind, veiled by many things. Look carefully then into the eyes of little children, and you will see a kind of light. Some describe it as candid, but so true, which looks at the world with wonder. Well, this sense of wonder, it is the wonder of the psychic, which sees the truth but does not understand much about the world, for it is too far from it. Children have this, but as they learn more, become more intelligent, more educated, this is effaced. And you see all sorts of things in their eyes: thoughts, desires, passions, wickedness. But this kind of little flame, so pure, is no longer there. And you may be sure it is the mind that has got in there, and the psychic has gone very far behind. A pet lizard? Yeah. Yeah, she had, I think there were cats. Bushy was one of her cats. Yeah. Yeah, also crows she would feed regularly, I think. But again, towards the end of this part of the passage, we see again the storyline. Nowhere she found her partner of high tasks, the comrade of her soul, her other self, who was made with her, like God and nature, one. Some near approached, were touched, caught fire, then failed. Too great was her demand, too pure her force. And then again, referring to the sun, thus lighting earth around her like a sun. Yet in her inmost sky, an orb aloof. A distance severed her from those most close. Puissant, apart, her soul as the gods live. So we continue, Nitya. At the top of the page, 367.
As yet unlinked with a broad human scene, in a small circle of young, eager hearts, her being's early school and closed domain, apprentice in the business of earth life, she schooled her heavenly strain to bear its touch. Content in her little garden of the gods, as blooms a flower in an unvisited place. Earth nursed, unconscious still, the inhabiting flame. Yet something deeply stirred and dimly new. There was a movement and a passionate call, a rainbow dream, a hope of golden change. Some secret wing of expectation beat, a growing sense of something new and rare and beautiful stole across the heart of time. Then a faint whisper of her touched the soil. Breathed like a hidden need the soul divines. The eye of the great world discovered her, and wonder lifted up its bardic voice.
Thank you. Here we see that at first the mother just has her close circle of people around her that are aware of her, that are touched by her and moved by her, looking up to her. But gradually, word begins to spread that here is somebody very special. So it begins as yet unlinked with the broad human scene. Yet she's not linked with the outside world very much. In a small circle of young, eager hearts, her being's early school and closed domain. This is where she's learning and developing, apprentice in the business of earth life. She schooled her heavenly strain to bear its touch, content in her little garden of the gods, as blooms a flower in an unvisited place. Yeah, she's just learning about people, learning about the world, perhaps learning of her deeper mission, as you suggest.
So I think it's also about to carry and to touch all these many people. I think that is a big start. And a few people to connect in another more conscious and like a more becomes more difficult to go with heaven.
But still, and here Sri Aurobindo describes it with this beautiful line at the end, as blooms a flower in an unvisited place. She's this greatness, but she's just blooming, unreally seen or known by the world at this point. Earth nursed, unconscious still, the inhabiting flame. So the earth was nursing her, but was still unconscious of her. Yet something deeply stirred and dimly knew. There was a movement and a passionate call, a rainbow dream, a hope of golden change. Some secret wing of expectation beat. A growing sense of something new and rare and beautiful stole across the heart of time. So something, perhaps some word of her, is beginning to spread around. A faint whisper of her touch the soil about her is beginning to reach out to the world, filtering out into the world and touching the souls around her. Breathed like a hidden need, the soul divines. The eye of the great world discovered her, and wonder lifted up its bardic voice. Bardic, that's poetic, I think, right? A bard is a poet. So it continue.
A key to a light still kept in being's cave, the sunward of an ancient mystery's sense. Her name ran murmuring on the lips of men, exalted and sweet like an inspired verse, struck from the epic lyre of rumor's winds, or sung like a chanted thought by a poet fame. But like a sacred symbols was the cult. Admired, unsought, intangible to the grasp, her beauty and flaming strength were seen afar, like lightning playing with the fallen day, a glory approachably divine. No equal heart came to her replying eyes. A power within her awed the imperfect flesh, the self-protecting genius in our clay, divined the goddess in the woman's shape, and drew back from a touch beyond its kind, the earth nature bound in sense life's narrow make.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So in this first sentence, the structure's a little difficult, but the subject of it is her name. So her name is that key to a light still kept in being's cave, the sunward of an ancient mystery sense. Her name ran murmuring on the lips of men, exalted and sweet like an inspired verse, struck from the epic lyre of rumor's winds, or sung like a chanted thought by the poet fame. But like a sacred symbols was that cult. Sung like a chanted thought by the poet Fame.
Famous poet, I think.
Yeah, I'm not... Sung like a chanted thought by Fame, but it's not clear what that means. But I wanted to read a little from Shraddhavan on this. Sri Aurobindo says her name is a key to a light that is still kept in the cave of being. It is a sun word of an ancient mystery sense. The name Savitri is in a way the key to the mystery of this poem. And not only the mystery of the poem, but of all that Sri Aurobindo is expressing in the poem. He says it is an ancient mystery, a mystery that is understood only by a few people, the rishis. Well, Fame is the divine presence. Significance is Savitri is the sun before it rises above the horizon, the pre-dawn sun. It is bringing a new light. That is what the name Savitri signifies. She is connected with dawn, with the coming of a new power, new light. Then I'm going to skip this other significance about the story. And then, okay, it continues. Remember that King Aswapati wanted 100 sons, but he was told, no, Brahma granted you this one daughter, but don't complain because this daughter will be worth 100 sons. Also, in the original story, one of the boons that Savitri gains from death is 100 sons for her father. Sri Aurobindo says that this is all part of the secret psychological symbolism of the Vedas. The sun is the symbol of the divine, existence, energy, power, delight. It is a fact that the physical sun, from the physical sun comes all our physical energy, everything we have. Nothing would ever exist here on earth if it were not in just the right relationship with the sun. Then she continues. Savitri is bringing a new light, a new energy, which is going to take the whole earthly evolution forward and conquer the darkness of ignorance, conquer the grip of death. She comes to save Satyavan, who is the soul of each human being, and the soul of humanity, and the soul of the earth, the one who carries the truth of being in itself. But here in the material universe, it has fallen into the grip of matter, the grip of ignorance, unconsciousness, and the need to die. She has come to change that law. So her name itself is the key to a light, a new light that is still there in the dark cave of existence. That sun has not emerged yet. It has not risen. It is still within the cave of the unmanifest, the cave of the unconscious. Her name is the sun word. It is a word expressing the sun, and it expresses the mystery which the Vedic rishis had. And then I thought it would be nice. Could I see that? This Gayatri mantra
सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन धीमहि सत्येन धीमहि ॐ तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन धीमहि सत्येन धीमहि
That's it.
That is there in this book or
Ed?
just about this paragraph. Poet fame.
Oh, she doesn't mention the poet fame. Yeah. I don't think she mentions that. I don't see. But I just wanted to stress that this Savitri, this was Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri mantra, but the other original Gayatri mantra is probably the most famous of all the mantras. But it relates to Savitri, and it includes Savitri in it. So this is something that has been there for so many thousands of years in the Indian tradition, murmuring on the lips of men for all these thousands of years. So it's quite remarkable. And the significance of that translation I don't have handy, but it's that she's bringing the light.
Was for the illumination of only the mind. And she also used Gayatri mantra as a transformational one before the divine mother was by all parts. That's why
Right.
But I also heard this one, but I could not find it in this mantra. In standard one.
And then we'll continue. Praveen?
The hearts of men are amorous of clay-kin, and hear not spirits lone and high, who in mighty solitude. Vain is his labor to create his kind. His only comrade is the strength within. Thus was it for a while with Savitri. All worshipped marvelingly, none dared to claim. Her mind sat high, pouring its golden beams. Her heart was a crowded temple of delight, a single lamp lit in a perfection's house, a bright pure image in a priestless shrine. Midst those encircling lives, her spirit dwelt, apart in herself until her hour of fate.
Thank you. So Sri Aurobindo is referring to perhaps one of the ordeals of avatarhood that, or any great spirit, human being who may live on the earth, that in a sense they have to live alone. It can be a lonely existence because nobody can really measure up to them, and also people draw back from something that's too great, too far beyond them. We prefer people to be at our own level that we can relate to in our kind of common ways. And so they live within themselves. His only comrade is the strength within. So they draw back on that genius that they may represent in the world. And this is especially true for the avatar, but I was kind of touched recently just seeing a film about Haydn, one of the great Western composers, who composed like 200 symphonies, more than 200 symphonies, and plus all these other things. I mean, there's really great people that have, walked on this earth and have done these amazing things. Other Western composers like Mozart and Beethoven have done kind of similar things, and yet how can they really relate to other, people around them? So they go and I think withdraw into their own greatness in some sense and into their work and produce these remarkable things. So she is living like that. No other man can really approach her, feels confident enough in her presence. All worshipped marvelingly, none dared to claim. And so she shed her light and her love on all around. A single lamp lit in perfection's house. A bright, pure image in a priestless shrine. Midst those encircling lives, her spirit dwelt, apart in herself, until her hour of fate. Yeah, Asupati. Okay, we stop there for today.
close to join her heart. Midst those encircling lives, her spirit dwelt apart in herself until her hour of fate.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.